Together with American songwriter, we had the opportunity to talk to Bhi Bhiman over Zoom video. Bhiman was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. He talks about how he got into music at a very early age, started playing guitar around 7 years old, and did that all through high school. Was in the high school jazz band. Ended up going to college at UC Santa Cruz, and there he started a band called Hippie Grenade. And he was in that band for a number of years and took it very seriously and eventually ran its course. And that's when he started his solo project, Bhi Bhiman. Put out his first record called Cookbook, but it wasn't until his second record, Bhiman, where things started to really happen for him. He ended up having the opportunity to play on Later with Jules Holland, which is a huge show in the UK. And while he was on that show, the other musical guest that evening was Soundgarden. And he grew up as a huge fan of Chris Cornell and Soundgarden. And he was able to hang out with the guys kind of after the show and ended up being asked to join Chris Cornell on his 2013 North American tour. So he did this huge tour with Chris Cornell, got to come out on stage and play Hunger Strike with him on tour every night. And from there, his career really got going. He told us a lot about the success of that record. I talked about his album Rhythm and Reason, his first record of all cover songs he put out called Substitute Preacher. He tells us all about the Peace of Mind record and the theme kind of behind it, where he launched each song as a podcast episode. So there's a theme to each song. Throughout the course of the podcast, the end of it ended up being the full record for Peace of Mind. He talks about that. And his most recent release, Substitute Preacher 2, which is another collection of cover songs from The Cars and AC/DC, Frank Sinatra, Black Sabbath. So definitely check that out. Substitute Preacher 2. And it'd be awesome if you check out our YouTube channel and Facebook page. We have some incredible video interviews up there at Bringing It Backwards. And it would be amazing if you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Bringing Back Pod.
We'd appreciate your support if you follow and subscribe to our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're Bringing It Backwards with Bhi Bhiman. So our podcast is all about you, your journey in music, and how you got to where you are now.
Cool.
So I always start off with where were you born and raised? I did read St. Louis, Missouri.
Yeah, I'm from St. Louis, born and raised there. My parents are immigrants from a country called Sri Lanka, which is like an island just south of India. And they've been here since like 1969, 1970, by way of California, then Chicago, then St. Louis. And my mom was more of like an academic type person. My dad's a little bit more of a silly type person and likes entertainment, and grew up watching American movies and watching and listening to American music on the radio. There's US bases in Sri Lanka, and then of course British bases before that, but they had a US radio station there, so he would listen to that. And so when I was growing up, he introduced me to some stuff like oldies radio and stuff like Creedence Clearwater and like all that 60s classic stuff that they would play in the 80s and 90s as oldies, which is awesome, just great feel good music. And that was a little bit of my introduction to music in terms of lighting any kind of spark or realizing that there's joy to be had from music. So I'm the second of two kids. So I had an older brother who's playing guitar and also heavily influenced what I would listen to as I grew up and as a teenager. But he had a guitar, but he never really played it or tried. And so I was sitting in the corner in my house, and I started playing that guitar when I was like 6 or 7. I took some lessons and stuff, but like classical lessons, which I despise. Especially classical guitar is pretty tough. And it's
like finger picking and all that.
Yeah, you have to there's like a foot stand on your left foot, so you have the guitar on your left knee if you're right-handed, which is kind of the opposite of what, let's say, you see Neil Young doing, or any songwriter like that. It's on their right knee. So anyway, it's just like a total different style. It's maybe Andre Segovia, which I've gotten appreciation for since then, like later as I grew older. But that's really advanced stuff, and I really just like like simpler songs. I guess I always liked, I like Dylan when I was young, but that's so simple, such a simple presentation, I guess you could say. Not
Mhm.
that his lyrics are simple, but his presentation is pretty straightforward. And and well, to say that I only like Dylan is not really true. I was really into heavy rock and roll music growing up.
Okay.
And so I learned like all the classic rock songs and stuff. I was a guitarist first and foremost. And I only started singing when I was like 20 or something. And I started playing
Wow.
guitar when I was about 7. So I'm in my mind, a much more accomplished guitar player than I am a singer.
Uh-huh.
But that's not really what people see first from me. They hear my voice first, which I understand. But I'm always like everything I write generally is like, is this cool on guitar? And is it also good vocally? But I'm always like coming from a guitar centric perspective for sure.
Mhm.
And growing up in St. Louis, there's a lot of blues there. And Chicago gets a lot of credit for blues, developing the blues sound, but there's a lot of towns, from the South on the way up to Chicago that helped develop the sound. And St. Louis is a very interesting historical city, being on the Mississippi River. So there's all these French and Spanish and British influences there, which is kind of unusual in America. People don't really think about how France and Spain were heavily involved in the development of the country. But musically, there's Chuck Berry, of course, one of my
Mhm.
heroes growing up. Just he's so easy to fall in love with, in my opinion. Like his lyrics are great, his stories are great, as well as his awesome guitar.
Mhm.
Um, and Ike and Tina Turner and like 100 blues musicians are from there. So the blues there is like a big deal, although it doesn't get a lot of credit for it. But there's a lot of good blues coming out of there, or there was. It's kind of dying art, I would say. Uh, not hitting the top of the charts these days. But yeah, St. Louis is a really good melting pot of music in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So it's interesting to grow up there.
Wow. And I mean, that's fascinating that you started so early. I mean, you said 7.
Yeah, I would say I'm like a great guitar player. Like I wouldn't say I'm a great singer, although I've gotten pretty
You're
good.
pretty
But I've
good.
yeah,
I beg to differ on that one.
I have yeah. So I agree. I've worked hard at it, and I love singing and stuff. But it's like if it's not fun to play on guitar, I kind of like don't continue working on a song if I'm writing something or something.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
just kind of funny that I'm so particular about the guitar stuff,
Mhm.
even though it's not necessarily the first thing that anybody cares about when they listen to me. You know,
Yeah. Well, tell me about like, so, learning guitar and kind of picking up these covers as you were saying, and being more into that heavier music. Like, what was the first, did you start a band early on, or like, when did you really start performing in front of people?
I wasn't in a band really. I was in a band like when I was younger. It was just my friends who also played guitar and had bass guitar. Our band was, I think it was called the Bottled Up Emotions. We were about like 10 years old.
Wow.
And
That's a pretty progressive name for a 10-year-old.
oh yeah, we were pretty proud. That wasn't my idea. It was like one of the other guys' ideas, and it was like clearly the winner out of all of ours. And but it was like 3 guitar players and a bass. It wasn't a band. It was just like a
No
bunch of kids.
drummer.
No drummer, and I no drummer. Didn't. What's the point? Just kidding. And we did like a talent show. I remember, and I played like all Star Spangled Banner by Jimi Hendrix, and I have no idea what the other guys were doing. There's nothing they could really be doing during that
Oh,
that
that
would
was the
sound
song
good.
you guys played?
Well, I
So
think I like took the lead and was like, I'm doing this or something, and they just had to like fall in line or something. I don't really know. I think we
they're
had somebody help arrange something, but I certainly didn't arrange anything. I think I was being
they're
pretty selfish.
they were like burning their guitars while you played.
Basically, yeah.
That's cool. So
And
you,
so, but I wasn't in a lot of bands. That was like a band. I was in like, high school band, but I was not considered the best by a long shot. I was like 4th chair or something. But
In
I
high
was
school,
good at what
you played in the high school band, you said?
I played in the jazz band, but
Oh,
I
cool.
couldn't. At that point, I wasn't like very into jazz at all, and I still am not. But but especially jazz guitar is not exactly my favorite genre of jazz. I just said, but and I was okay, but in when it came to like learning Zeppelin songs or Black Sabbath or Rage Against the Machine or Nirvana, I like actually already knew all that stuff really well, but it just didn't. When I did the band tryout for jazz band, it was like that's not a currency in jazz, so it really wasn't worth much.
You
But I was
didn't
very
show up and
good.
do like Down Rodeo as your audition song.
Yeah, yeah, I would have gotten sent away. But I don't know what I did, but it was like something simple or whatever.
Hmm.
And but I was very good, but I just wasn't good at that. But I wasn't in any rock bands, I guess, until I went to college at I went to UC Santa Cruz. So made it back out to California, which
Okay.
is where my parents came through, San Jose, California. So there are a lot of family friends there, and we would
Oh,
visit when I
cool.
was younger. Yeah, and so I always loved California growing up, and as I was a teenager, like Bill Graham era shows and stuff like that, like Santana and
Hmm.
Creedence Clearwater, and like those 60s and 70s Bay Area bands, Sly and the Family Stone, Tower of Power. Like I
Hmm.
love those bands so much. And so that was kind of a draw as well, just like going back to the Bay Area somehow, some way.
Hmm.
And so I was in a band called Hippie Grenade, and that was like the first serious band I was in Santa Cruz with some really talented players. And it was you could say it was like a funk outfit, I guess you could say, kind of like a heavier funk outfit. I would kind of uh, people would cringe when I'd say this, but it was I said it was kind of like Soundgarden meets Sly and the Family Stone,
Oh, interesting.
which is interesting, and some people didn't think that was cool, but I thought it was cool. But we were a great band, and um, we were together for about 7 years or something like that,
Wow.
and I that was 2000 to like 2007, and then I decided to just do a solo act, I guess, or like try it out solo, because I was doing a lot of acoustic shows on the side. I was like doing solo stuff and stuff with the band, and I just kind of started leaning heavier into that, and kind of took me that direction of just being the only one writing, because I
Hmm.
was writing material with the band, and the band was democratic, and democracy can be a little bit ugly sometimes, as we have seen recently. um, and it's it was easier to make decisions by myself, and even on
Hmm.
stage when you're alone, the road is lonely, but on stage you're in control of everything, and it's cool. You're the rhythm section, you're the lead, and it's freeing. It's a lot of work, honestly, to be the only one up there and holding the audience's attention,
Hmm.
but it's something I can do pretty naturally, so I enjoy it. But that's not to say I only play solo. I play with a
Hmm.
band quite a bit, half the time, I would say.
Sure. With that, after the first band or after Hippie Grenade kind of ran its course and you started the solo
Uh-huh.
project, what was like, what was the first thing that happened? Like, you must have been taking music pretty seriously at that point if you had been doing it, 7 years through college. Did you?
Yeah. So we had been doing it for about 4 years post college, pretty seriously, playing in San Francisco and the Bay
Mhm.
Area,
Uh-huh.
Oakland, and around. Um, but it was personal politics and stuff like that. They're still my friends. It's just working with them is, and probably working with me, same thing for them.
Hmm.
But it had run its course, like you said. And I was taking it seriously, and that was like part of why I wanted to do it on my own, because I could just kind of have complete control of what I would do, what I
Hmm.
would be doing career wise. Um, so yeah, I was taking it very seriously. I was writing a lot, like constantly, and so by the time 2010 rolled around, I was recording an album which was called Beeman, Bhiman, and That got released in 2012, and it's a really cool album. It has like a really, I don't remember what my inspiration of like oh, I know what it was. I was listening to Blood on the Tracks a ton, by Bob Dylan.
By Bob
It's
Dylan.
like
Okay.
it's just a classic sounding record, and
I love that album too.
yeah, it has a feeling like from beginning to end, and it was inspiring. And I think I kind of like took that sort of energy and brought it to my album. And it has a kind of this acoustic rock, whatever. I don't know. I don't like those two words together, but that's the best I can do.
Yeah.
Let's call it acoustic rock.
And with that record, like, I mean, you put out Cookbook. That was the first album you did, right?
Yes.
207.
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
2007. And it's not available anymore because I kind of like took it down. I wasn't very proud of it, even though there's good songs. I didn't really love the production. And so I have those files. I might release that again, maybe remix some of it. Or I mean, even Bob Dylan would regurgitate songs and re-record them on later albums. And so that might happen. But I like the songs. That album was like, you know how like the freshman album of a band or artist is the collection of everything they've ever done up until that point. And then the sophomore album is, okay, now I have to write new stuff, right? So that first album was everything I'd ever written since I was 18 or something. And at that point 2007 was, what was I, 25 or something. So yeah, that was like a long chunk of time where I was writing for that album, essentially, even though I didn't know I was writing for it. But
don't they say like you have your whole life to write your first album and then like a couple of years to follow up the second?
That's exactly what I was trying to say, but I didn't say it as eloquently as that. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, when you put out Beeman, your second record I know you got to do some pretty big touring with that album, and you got to be on television, and like a lot of stuff happened with that record. What kind of got the ball rolling?
Well, I think I had a cool music video for the lead single Gutter Snipe, and I did get on TV. I got on like the biggest TV show in England, which at the time was called later with Jules Holland on BBC Two or BBC One. I'm not sure. But I've actually never been on American TV, but I've actually had almost a better amount of success in England. But that might also be that there's a lot of South Asians there because of British colonialism, and a lot of people from Pakistan and India and Sri Lanka have come to England, and they're kind of part of the fabric of society in a way, almost the way but in America, it's not. People don't look at Indian Americans or whatever you might call them quite the same way. They're not like part of the fabric in that same way, not yet. So I've had some good success over there. Got a lot of traction over there, honestly. Not that I haven't had enviable success in America as well.
Sure.
But I thought it was noticeable when I went over there. Just a different sort of energy.
Real quick, did people like how did you start seeing, I mean, were people picking up your record off online, and like how did you start seeing numbers and getting to the point where you get to play on Jules Holland like in the UK, whereas like, I mean, when you're an artist from Santa Cruz or Bay Area, right? I mean, like how did that connection happen?
Well, we had a distribution deal out there, and it was kind of they had a publicist that they worked with, and that publicist just did a really good job. And she reached out to the Jules Holland people, which is basically like the Saturday Night Live equivalent of like, whatever big show you might do as a musician. Yeah, it's massive.
Everyone's
like Paul McCartney. Yeah, Paul McCartney and so on. And it's a really unique format. If you go back for your listeners to check that show out, because it's a real fun way to check out music, because you're checking out new music, you're checking out legends, all at the same time. It's unique in that it's almost like playing in the round, where everybody has to listen to everybody. So if Paul McCartney was there, they'd have to listen to me. And the legends that night were Soundgarden, and I was a huge Soundgarden fan, and I got to meet them and everything.
That's amazing.
But to get on the show, I think just the talent buyer or whatever the title is, just saw something in the video, because the video is like this really interesting slow motion train footage from India. And if you're on a train in India, you're zipping past 50 miles an hour or whatever, and there's a lot of scenes going by and you don't know what's going on. It looks beautiful, but my video was this slow-mo video, and you can see all these amazing scenes developing as you go by town after town after town. And it's kind of mesmerizing, along with the music, which is a really good driving, like car driving song, or train riding song, I guess. So the talent buyer saw that, really liked it. I mean, it's a cool song. It's still one of my favorite songs. And so that's the song I played on the show. And it's not like I was so in demand that they booked me for the show. It was kind of on the hunch of this talent buyer. He's like, oh, this is cool, let's have him on. And that actually elevated me in England quite a bit, like overnight, almost. Wow. As you can imagine, like being on SNL or something, or whatever, or what used to be Ed Sullivan type of deal.
Sure.
Which is awesome. So like the next thing I know, I'm opening for like Rodriguez, who sings the song Sugar Man, which is an amazing song. Everybody should check that guy out. But I was doing a lot of cool stuff, opening for Lucinda Williams out in UK, doing my own headlining shows. But I was flying back and forth. It was a lot of travel, and a lot of crazy hours and stuff like that. And so I was going back and forth between touring the East Coast and the West Coast of the US, and going back to England to do follow-up shows, doing tours around Europe, France and Scandinavia, and Holland and stuff like that. Sounds very exciting. It's kind of grueling, but because you're not going on vacation. You're getting into whatever, Brussels one day. You're there, you get a meal, you walk around for like an hour, you go to this show, you're doing a sound check, you hang around, maybe get a coffee, you play the show, you're tired, you go to bed, you wake up, and then you go to the next town. And then you do it all over again. So it's not like, oh, I got to spend a week in Brussels or something like that. It's fast moving, as any touring artist will tell you. But it's crazy. You get a lot of cool memories for sure.
That's amazing. And you ended up getting the chance to tour with Chris Cornell, didn't you?
Chris. Yeah. And so that all resulted from going on Jules Holland. So like I said earlier, is that what's interesting about Jules Holland is that it's I think this is the right term, but in the round is where everybody who's playing that night has to sit and watch and wait their turn to play the song. And so there's about 5 bands on the show, and Soundgarden was one of the bands. And so they played, and another band played, and then I would play, and everybody's watching each other. And afterwards, I was just like, these guys literally are my childhood heroes. Right. My favorite band growing up. I learned, like, I had this Hal Leonard tab book or Cherry Lane. Those were the 2 giants in guitar tablature books in the 90s. But I had the Super Unknown album tab book from Soundgarden, and I like learned every single song. I like knew everything when I was like 15 years old. And so I was like a massive fan. And I got to meet them. I was like, this is kind of crazy that they're on this show, and they happened to be here. And so I was like nervous, but I was like, I got to go say hello and tell them what they meant to me and blah, blah, blah. Sure. Something that they would not care too much about, but it would be more for me. And I ended up doing it, and they invited me to have a beer. So I got to hang out with these guys who I knew all about. It was cool. But Chris, I talked to for just a brief moment. He was like, oh, that's cool. I loved your song, blah, blah, blah. But he kind of, at the time, he was like a recovering alcoholic. I don't want to get into his stuff too much, because I don't know the nitty gritty. But he he would leave after the show, not be maybe around people drinking. But the rest of the guys had a beer, and I hung out with them afterwards. And Kim Thiel, who's an Indian of Indian ancestry, he's fully American, but technically he would say an Indian American from Chicago, which is another alluring aspect of Soundgarden. But to see a brown South Asian dude playing guitar in a rock band, that was cool for me. So he was always a hero. And we were talking afterwards, and he was saying how Chris was saying, like, my right hand was like a rock, like very steady and whatever. He was noticing how I was playing and some other stuff I don't remember. And I was flattered, and I hung out with them for a short bit, and that was very cool. Dream come true, I would say. And
yeah,
like 9 months later, Chris's management team asked my team if I would go out and tour for his solo acoustic tour in the following fall, winter. And it ended up being like an enormous North American tour, like 45 dates across 2.5 months. And it was incredible. Like I got to play Hunger Strike with him every night.
Wow.
Because it was like, he was like, we should play a song. The first night we had a show, he's like, we should play a song together. And I was like, okay, let me think about it. I didn't want to like do some song that I didn't like for some reason. No offense to any songs of his.
Right.
But I had my favorites, right? So I was like, okay, that would be epic. So it's like, some wise people have told me you won't get what you don't ask for, right? That's a saying. Like, you don't get what you don't ask for. So I straight up asked him for Hunger Strike, and he was like, sure, let's do it. No hesitation. And so we ended up doing it every night, and every once in a while we'd do another song. We did some Audio Slave songs, and at one point he broke into Hotel California in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And made me do the Jill Walsh guitar solo, just like just a totally unrehearsed, like messing with me. Definitely a good memory, pretty funny.
That's amazing.
But yeah, he was like probably my best champion of my music, like an amazing friend to have in the music industry, I would say. And it was just flattering that he was like, yeah, like he lived in Miami at one point. He's like, I was listening to your album on repeat. This is the Beeman album. So for him to like know my songs like that was pretty awesome.
Wow. Sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I had an opportunity to meet him in San Diego. I don't know if maybe you're on the tour. It was right around the Higher Truth, when he put out Higher Truth, the solo record.
It was 2013. I did play, I played San Diego. It was called like the Casablanca or something. I don't know where it was called. I forget.
Okay.
No, that's probably not right. But
yeah, I my wife and I had a chance to meet. I was working for a radio station. That's where my background was, all from radio. So I know the Bay Area pretty well. I used to work for Live 105 in San Francisco. And
cool.
But we had the chance to meet Chris Cornell, and it was so much different than meeting any other artist I'd ever met. It was like you knew you're in the presence of like a legend. It's hard to even explain. It was just so weird.
Well, it's like, imagine like meeting Johnny Depp, kind of, is what I tell people. Like, I don't know if that's what your experience was, but I'm like, yeah, he has like an allure or something. Like, there's some mysteriousness to him, but he's also very friendly and really funny and
yeah,
warm.
very cool. Yeah, very warm. I mean, he did a little acoustic set basically for the people at the radio station. He did Josephine.
Okay.
And it was cool. Like, I don't know. It was like a religious experience, just having him play that song. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is just so. It was insane.
Watching him work was awesome. Not just on stage, but he'd really be working like a lot throughout the day on warming up his vocals, but also just practicing. He'd always have like a guitar handy, and he'd be working on something. And it's funny, he has this huge voice that he's probably blown out like 10 times from just belting super hard, which I've blown my voice out from belting and stuff like that. And sometimes by midday or afternoon, like 5 or 6 or 7 hours before the show, he'd be singing it. It would not sound that good. I'll just put it that way. I'd be like, whoa, are you going to be able to do it tonight?
Right.
But he'd always get there. He'd always get to like the most professional. Like he would be able to sing everything by the end of the night, and he would play like 3-hour shows sometimes of just him like doing all this heavy rock material, like Robert Plant style stuff, whatever. And it's like kind of unbelievable to watch him. It's like watching an athlete or something, and his muscles were his throat, his vocal cords. And he wasn't there. He would know when he would get to his warmed up voice, and sometimes it'd take a long time. Sometimes it'd just be there like in 10 minutes. But it was cool to watch him work. Definitely.
Wow. So I mean, huge success on that record that you put out. I mean, touring with them, and then so the next record you did was Rhythm and Reason.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
what would you say? Like,
I think in between that, I did a Substitute Preacher album, but it was pretty low key. It was like a covers album with Walk of Life on it and stuff. But I did do the follow up. Was Rhythm and Reason.
Oh, okay, so there was because Substitute Preachers 2 came out.
Just came out. Yeah.
Just came out. So Substitute Preachers had what? Like it was a covers record as well.
Correct. Yeah, it was like Walk of Life, Highway to Hell.
Oh, rad.
Rainbow in the Dark by Dio. I can't remember. I'm losing my mind, I guess.
Sure.
I can't remember the 2 songs.
Okay.
But kind of a classic rock sort of nod to classic rock, but kind of making it a little bit more old timey sounding. Kind of like Highway to Hell. I did in a style kind of like an old Christian gospel style, like the Carter Family.
Rad.
Kind of a cheeky joke to make, like an inside joke for myself. Nobody else would get, but
because I can't find that record on. It's not. Did you take it off streaming platform?
It should be there. Let me see. I don't know. I don't check myself out enough.
All right. Well, I'll find it. I'll dig for it later.
Yeah.
But so you put out in 2015. That's when you put out Rhythm and Reason. Tell me about that album. What was is that the record that you wrote in like what's, or maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh, I think I'm thinking of Peace of Mind, where you wrote it kind of over like a podcast.
Yeah, that's Peace of Mind.
Okay, well, tell me real quick about the other one
when we get there.
Yeah.
So from Rhythm and Reason was I doing tons of touring, and I've always like had social commentary to make in all my songs, but I also kind of hide it away sometimes, so it's not uber apparent. Because it's kind of, I don't want it to be like Rage Against the Machine, like where it's like just like overt, and sometimes it's just a turn off. But I love commentary. So I was touring a lot in Europe and the US, and at that time, there's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment just around the world. And so a lot of that album has this not that it's anti-immigrant, but it had to do with immigration, I guess you could say. Okay. The whole thing. And so moving to Brussels I was literally in Brussels airport, and I saw all these different nationalities walking by. And in Belgium, in Brussels, there's a lot of Central Africans, because Belgium went to Central Africa to mine diamonds or whatever the hell they did there, and murder a lot of people apparently. But so and England went to India, so there's a lot of Indian immigrants there. France has a lot of North Africans. It's all like, all those immigrants are there for a reason, but there's a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment. So I wrote this song called Moving to Brussels, and I disguised it as a love breakup song, where an immigrant has to kind of like leave its country, but I just didn't make it about immigration or leaving your country. Is kind of like leaving your girlfriend or something, and I'm breaking up with you, and I'm packing up and I'm leaving. And that was an inspiration for that. I have a song called There Goes the Neighborhood on there. But it was all written like backstages throughout the world, I guess.
Wow.
Almost entirely, I would say, because I didn't have a lot of home time at that time. And then I had a child after that, so I kind of made a conscious effort to try to be home more because I mean, there's a lot of angles you can there's a lot of ways that you can parent, but I think like the overriding thing is to just be around, be present. And when you're on tour, you're not present at all. You're far away, and I just didn't like that dynamic. So I tried to kind of cut back on touring. So the next albums were kind of written more at home, I guess you could say.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But if you have if you want to talk more about Rhythm and Reason, if you have more questions, I can talk about that. I kind of moved away.
No. I was just wondering what would you say like what would you say the milestone of the record would be?
Sorry, say that again.
What would be the big milestone that you could take away from that album?
Oh, well, I got to do it for moving to Brussels. I got to do a music video with Keegan Michael Key, who I had met doing this NPR radio show in St. Paul, Minneapolis, called Wits, and they have like just like Saturday Night Live has a actor and a musical guest. This show had an actor and musical guest. I was the musical guest, and Keegan Michael Key was the actor.
Wow!
And we got to hang out. We did some stuff on stage, which was like show business stuff, but then we got to hang out afterwards and have some drinks and got friendly. And then I asked him if he would do this music video with me for moving to Brussels, and he liked the song. And I was like, great, now I just need a concept. And so I was scrambling for stuff. I thought about all these different ideas, and like literally very last minute, 11th hour, I was watching this movie called Whiplash. And Whiplash was about this drummer who had a really overbearing music teacher who was J.K. Simmons. It like won a bunch of awards.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. It was a great film.
He's a drummer. Yeah. And he just like, it's almost like a psychological thriller, I guess you could say.
It
almost horror, but not horror. That's not right. But
because J.K. Simmons is like the villain almost.
He's a villain. Yeah, he's really like manipulative and
sure.
Yeah. And so I came up with the idea to have Keegan be the overbearing teacher and I'm the music student. And we made a music video. It's kind of cheeky, jokey thing, and it was a lot of fun. It was pretty awesome to see him work. He's just like a fire hose of ideas. So we got a lot of good stuff. We got a lot of stuff that couldn't even make it into the 4-minute video. So it was pretty cool for sure.
That's amazing.
That would be a highlight, I would say.
Definitely. And does that take us to the Peace of Mind record?
Yeah, it does. So Peace of Mind kind of began, I think it basically began the summer of 2016.
Okay.
Even though it was only released in 2019, it was kind of a bigger project for me, I would say, because I released it as a podcast, which I'll explain shortly.
Yeah.
But I began in 2016, I guess, writing for it, although I only was thinking I was writing a single because a friend of mine who's a very famous author named Dave Eggers, he lives in the Bay Area, and I've done some events with him, and he was doing like this soundtrack, kind of an anti-Trump soundtrack. So this was summer of 2016, and Trump was campaigning against Clinton, and the writing was on the wall, so to speak, with him at that point, and all the Russia stuff had come out, and so he asked me to write a song, and I ended up writing this song called "With Love from Russia," kind of a joke on the James Bond movie theme.
Yeah,
and it's about Trump just kind of being owned by foreign interests. Kind of a funny song, a little bit, but very cool song. It's very riff driven. I love riffs and heavy rock and stuff like that. So it kind of has a heavy rock aspect to it. But it was the first song I ever produced from start to finish on my laptop, which was kind of a milestone for me.
Oh, that's amazing.
I had spent a long time, just like trying to get up to date with technology and my setup and stuff like this. And so I was simultaneously writing and producing it and everything in my just a very humble apartment bedroom studio. And it turned out pretty cool. And I was just like pretty proud of myself, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just a single for that project that he was doing, Dave Eggers was doing. And I think the second song I wrote for that was like the day after, 2 days after November 8th, when Trump was elected. I mean, I will say I'm not a Trump fan, so I'll say that. And so I wrote this song called Giant. And that was the second song I wrote. It's kind of about how the glass ceiling is for women is quite high, a little bit farther out of reach than everybody thought. Mm-hmm. And from there, I was like, oh, I kind of have like, there's a concept kind of brewing here. And I love concept albums and Pink Floyd and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So that was a bit of an inspiration. And from there, I had some seeds of ideas I was writing, and I ended up coming up with 10 or 11 songs over the course of the next year that I recorded. And I recorded it all by myself in my home studio. And that was cool. I mean, it's a lot of work to do that all by myself. So I think I was just kind of like a challenge a bit. Mm-hmm. And then for myself and my wife, Katie Ross, who's also my manager and does a lot of work in the music business in LA where we live. Mm-hmm. We were talking, she's a huge podcast fan, and this was 2016, 17, and podcasts were around, but Serial was the first huge podcast, viral or just cult classic or pop mm-hmm. culture, not cult classic at all. It was like a pop culture thing. Mm-hmm. When Serial became big, and then the floodgates of podcasting started to open up.
Sure.
So, because anything is possible, right? It's a total blank canvas. You can do whatever you want, as you surely know. Mm-hmm. And so she was telling me there's an opportunity here because of what you're talking about, because of the nature of the politics in America, to do a podcast. And we developed it over the course of a few months with some serious podcasters' help and people who are in public radio who do storytelling and stuff like that, in terms of laying it out, because it's a world. It's like making a movie sometimes. If the production of it is you need to plan and mm-hmm. Write and prepare and all this stuff, and cut the interviews at, all that stuff. So the first episode was amazing to do. It features Dave Eggers, and we talk about his work. He did a bunch of stuff for probably, I think, the New Yorker and New York Times, where he would go to Trump rallies and kind of ask people what they thought, and he got kind of a gauge of people. And we talked about the state of America. And so in the first episode, we had 3 guests. Dave Eggers is the first one. The second one was podcaster named Glenn Washington. And he does a show called Snap Judgment, which is on WNYC. And he was telling me about how he grew up he's a black man, from a black family, and he grew up in a white supremacist Christian cult.
Wow, that's interesting.
In Michigan. It wasn't overt how it was white supremacist, it just kind of was. But he was kind of saying how his family got the hood pulled over their eyes, or the wool pulled over their eyes, whatever it was, mm-hmm. And kind of got tricked by this con man. And so the first episode's all about kind of the insanity of the politics in our country at that time. And so he talks about his experiences being in this cult and the kind of cognitive dissonance, where you kind of suspend your beliefs so that, or you ignore what you see just so that your beliefs are upheld.
Sure.
And I'm not smart enough to say that correctly, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying.
No, I get where you're going.
And then the final guest on that episode is Professor Lee Ross. He's kind of a giant in the social sciences field, and he's a professor at Stanford, and he talks about kind of why people do the things they do and think the way they think, and why there is a kind of a tribalism effect going on, and how people feel close to each other, and how you can create a sense of community even when there isn't one, of a case of us and them. And it was a very interesting episode, which I round out with kind of like a breakdown of my album, of the song. And so I talk about how I wrote it, and I play some samples of demos, and I separate the tracks out so that you can hear the drums, hear the guitars, hear the vocals individually. And I kind of tell you how I wrote it, how I produced it, and just kind of a thing for the music people, because prior to that, the only thing musical about it was the soundtrack, which is also part of it. Sorry, one second.
Mm-hmm.
The soundtrack to the episode is always like sub mixes of the actual song that is getting released at the end. So the song on the first episode is called "Brother, Can You Spare Some Peace of Mind?" So throughout, like on Dave Egger's interview, I have the drums playing with the bass without the vocals and stuff like that. And so I got to have a lot of fun with kind of remixing the song to make a soundtrack for the episodes.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. Kind of a creative pursuit that I didn't think I would ever be doing. So I was doing that, doing the editing and stuff on that. And it was a very cool project. So there's about 10 episodes. Each one has a different theme. Voter suppression is another one. I talked to the ACLU head of voting rights, and I talked about immigration with the ACLU head of immigration rights. And so a lot of smart people are on the podcast. It's not a music podcast per se.
Sure.
So
you just use music as kind of like the underlying theme.
Correct.
And you put a new song per episode?
Yes. So that's how the album was released. Every week, a new episode and a new song would be released. And so by the end of it, the album was released.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was a lofty goal, but it was very cool to do. And at that time, it was like a pretty new, I think it was a new idea. I don't think anybody had done anything like that. So
I can't think of anyone that even to this, like to put out a record that way, as far as like in a podcast setting, I haven't.
Yeah.
It's still pretty.
Yeah. Unusual, if not, rare. But it was very cool. And what was interesting was that I kind of occupy this space of, I write topical songs sometimes, and I can be funny sometimes in my songs. So I've played a lot of events where it's not a music event, like it's not a festival or something. It's like a book, a literature event, or a radio event or something like that, like an NPR event. So I've met all these like kind of brilliant people that I don't really have any business meeting, but I end up becoming friends with them. And so I drew upon those people for this podcast, like Dave Eggers and Glenn Washington, for example. So it was a cool way to kind of like draw on that history of my career.
And where were you at? Because the whole record came out, in 2019?
Correct. I was in LA. I wrote the whole thing in LA, basically right up at my house.
Okay. And then from there, like where were you at when this whole pandemic hit?
Still in the same place. And I live in LA. And I was in the Bay Area for a long time, but I've been in LA for like 4 years.
Okay.
And yeah.
And how did that affect, like, how did that affect you as far as, obviously it affected you because you're inside, but you ended up putting out the Preacher, Substitute Preacher Part 2. And was that all birthed out of this whole pandemic?
Almost all of it, but there's one or two where it was recorded earlier at a previous session that I kind of dug up that I didn't have the files to anymore. Kind of a long lost thing.
Okay.
But then a friend of mine still had it. The guy engineer who ran the session still had a couple of these. And then the rest were done in my studio at home. But the pandemic was like, like certain things in life kind of flip a switch in terms of your mentality. And I think a lot of people felt that when everything shut down. It's like, okay, how, like, now I have to deal with this. And like, so you kind of gear up and you go for it and you figure everything out. And you, like, I didn't panic or anything. I guess I was just like, okay, we have to do this stuff for our daughter, deal with school and
Oh
everything.
yeah, I feel you on that, man. I got 2 kids. That was a challenge in
Oh god.
itself.
So are they? So are they back? Did they get to go back at the end of the year this year?
Well, we ended up moving out of. I'm from San Diego, and we ended up moving to Nashville. So when we got
Okay.
here, we got here a couple months ago. They're all in school. So
Oh,
once
good.
we moved here, everyone was. I mean, they were able to go face to face. But I
Cool.
mean, obviously with masks and all that. But it was a lot different than trying to continue on
Yeah.
Zoom calls and all that other thing. All the fun that came with that. So
Right. Yeah. So like it's hard to make. You have 2 kids. I only have 1, but obviously they like come first in
sure.
almost every situation. So you had a parent and you know, cover all their needs, and then you have to figure out how can you milk out some energy to do the things that you want to do, like
Right.
I want to play music or write or produce or do something. So a lot of like, I think at first I was just like, okay, I have to like consolidate all my stuff and like turn my studio into a part-time learning center for my child. And it wasn't too bad. I didn't panic. I guess I'm a bit of an introvert in a way. So I've heard that introverts can kind of kind of dealt with the situation okay, and
Sure.
extroverts kind of had a bit of a harder time. But I've been rehearsing for that moment where there's no studios open and you got to record at home. I've been preparing for that moment for a long time now, or had been, and so it was fine for me in a way because I was still able to do almost everything I usually did except have friends over to
Mhm.
record or go over to their house. But that wasn't terribly inconvenient, and I got better at recording, and I just kind of took some time to do some things that I wanted to do, like learn how to play piano and like singer-songwriter type piano and get better at that. And I
Mhm.
did that a bit. And
So you're able to
yeah,
adapt
I was, and
pretty
I have written.
smoothly.
I actually have written enough for another album over the course of the last year or whatever. So as soon as I get that kind of finalized, and I'll probably work with Sam Kassir again on some of it. Sam Kassir is the producer of the Bhiman album and the Rhythm and Reason albums, and he's actually on like all my albums in some fashion. He's also produced like for Lake Street Dive and Josh Ritter and Langhorne Slim and a bunch of people.
Oh wow.
So he's awesome. But that hasn't happened yet. I haven't sent him anything yet because I just released this covers thing. So I was
Uh-huh.
simultaneously just doing the covers thing and original material and working with other people. Actually, I was doing like some things I would never have thought I would do. Being in LA, I got to work on some EDM songs that actually they needed. I mean, they're not EDM; they're like pop songs, but they have dance elements, and they needed acoustic versions of these. So I got to work on these David Guetta songs. I got to work on Steve Aoki songs.
Yeah, I saw that. You
Go,
got to work with Kira, who we've interviewed
yeah.
before.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
she sounds cool. So I got to like work with these vocal files from these major releases. Like there's a song called Heartbreak Anthem that's like kind of enormous right now by Galantis.
Uh-huh.
And Galantis has this guy Christian from Mike Snow and a bunch of other projects he does, but he's awesome. He's like an amazing producer. But basically they do like their huge pop EDM song, and then they needed like an acoustic one. So I've been doing the guitars for that and some harmonies every once in a while, and just kind of like doing this weird job that I never thought I'd be doing. So that's been kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Just a different hat.
Yeah. So you have to like kind of rework the song into like an acoustic version.
Yeah. And I get to like sneak in stuff that a pop producer who puts an acoustic guitar in wouldn't think to do. I like will do something like a Neil Young thing or some little inside joke for myself. I'll do some stylistic stuff that they probably wouldn't have thought of, and it's cool. It's fun.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Well, I love the covers record you just put out. I think it's awesome that you did Magic Carpet Ride. That was one of my favorites, and Paranoid by Black Sabbath.
Thanks. Yeah.
How was it? Was it hard to choose songs, or were those just ones that you know,
I have a lot
quite a bit?
Yeah, well, I have a lot of covers kind of like I try out. Some are just like kind of better and feel better as I play them. And those ones felt way better to me. They feel like actual songs as opposed to me just like acoustifying the electric version.
Right.
It seems like it's my own. And so I really work hard to make it my own if I can. And make it almost unrecognizable until you hear the chorus. Like, I mean, all along the Watchtower is like a great example of that cover song being bigger than the original.
Sure.
By Jimmy.
Yeah.
So that obviously that's a lofty goal, but that's my bar, I guess I would say. So I'm always kind of looking for that. And even like Ray Charles is like kind of a master of arranging covers of other people's songs. Who would do like I'm pretty sure he did some Cole Porter stuff, but he would just like draw on these songs and really make them his own. And that's also inspiring. And part of my thing is like to kind of go back in time and almost reverse engineer the song so that it's almost like AC/DC is doing a cover of my Back in Black. That's what I'm thinking. But so my Back in Black is kind of a Everly Brothers, Johnny Cash style song, which on the surface is just kind of funny, but it's also cool and it works to me.
Yeah.
And what else is on there? Paranoid is like, yeah, kind of country gospel style. And Magic Carpet Ride was fun. It's almost like a child song. I mean, the lyrics are a little bit childlike, but
oh, totally.
I kind of made it very light. Obviously, the original is like pretty heavy, especially that intro and everything. But yeah, I just was trying to have fun with it. I mean, naturally, over time, you kind of whittle things down to what's good and what's not so good and what's bad and all that. So it just, over the course of time, it whittled down to those 5 or 6 that made it on there.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, man, for chatting with me today.
Thanks.
I really, really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Before I let you go,
yeah.
Sorry. I was gonna say
go ahead. I was gonna say
before I let you go, I want to know if I can get if you had any advice for aspiring artists.
Yeah. I would say for a couple of things. First, believe in yourself. And if you don't believe in yourself, probably no one else will. Second, I would say something I've learned over the years is that second guessing your instincts is not a good idea. You can, especially killing the momentum of your instincts. I think you can edit what you've done down the line, but in the moment you should be a little bit more free and trust your instincts. Like kind of, I love baseball. So anytime I can, and I grew up playing a lot of baseball. So anytime I can like do a baseball analogy, I will use it. But in baseball, they say, trust your hands. They know what to do. Like, so you don't need to think about it too much. And your instincts are an incredibly evolved supercomputer, I guess you could say. Like your instincts are doing something so highly evolved over the course of your life that you should not throw them away. Your first initial instinct, your first reaction to something, like even now, if I'm about to do a guitar solo over one of my songs, or if I need to do something and I'm like not recording it, I won't even listen to the song. I will be like, I'm not ready to record, so I won't listen to it because I want to get the first reaction on tape or whatever on my computer. I want to record my first reaction and not do my first reaction and then kind of change it. I want to get the first one and then I'll continue recording and then it'll probably change. But that first reaction can also be amazing. It can be your best idea. Just like, I don't know, like I don't know. In life, trusting your instincts can pay off a lot, not just in music, but all over the place.
I love it.
So that's what I would tell people.